between Brahmananda and Vikeshwar Pandit. You'll read it here. This is from the Adi Leela. Prabhupada says, in the Gaura Ganodesha Dipaka 71, it is stated that Vikeshwara Pandit was an incarnation of Aniruddha, one of the Tridupal expansions of Vishnu, Vasudeva, Shankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna. He could dance wonderfully for 72 continuous hours. Now, Prabhupada, Brahmananda states he was the first, well, Prabhupada actually, I'll play the video, it's only 3 minutes long. In a lecture in New York, Prabhupada states it was Brahmananda and Achyutananda who were the first to dance in Tompkins Square Park. And Brahmananda, Prabhupada would do kirtan for 3 hours, from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the park, and then we take people back for the love feast. I was in the crowd passing out leaflets, Stay High Forever, and giving the address of the temple where they can come for the love feast. Not everybody came, because most of the people, the temple was in a district which was full of different nationalities, mostly Slavic, Poland, Russian, Ukrainian, many people of that, and Puerto Rican. It was on the Lower East Side. You can rent an apartment there in those 100-year-old buildings for $50 a month. So it was a very poor area. A lot of shops were closed, boarded up. Prabhupada didn't like the area, but it was perfect for his preaching. And that's where he started public chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. No Swami had ever done this publicly. They would stay in their private apartments and invite people, but nobody would go out in the street publicly wearing robes, Indian robes, and chant Hare Krishna. Most of the yogis or swamis at that time wore suits, or maybe sometimes a Nehru jacket with a high collar, but nobody wore a lungi or a dhoti. Prabhupada was the first to do that. And Prabhupada, his godbrother once told him, because they served some prasadam, this was before Prabhupada came to America, and they were serving prasadam, and there was spoon, fork, and knife. But Prabhupada was eating with his hands. And so his godbrother said, oh, if you're going to America, you have to learn how to eat with a fork and a spoon and a knife. And Prabhupada said, I'm going there not to adopt their culture, but to teach them a new culture. And this is before he went to America. This is like in the 1940s. So it was always in his mind to go to America and the West and preach. He was preparing. And the main preparation was to publish books. Because if you're an author, you get prestige in the Western countries. And so Prabhupada prepared, he did his Bhagavatam. So when Prabhupada started there, Brahmananda was the first to dance. And he danced, he thought that Prabhupada wouldn't stop for 3 hours. Sometimes he'd briefly stop for a few minutes to explain the chanting, but Brahmananda kept dancing for the 3 hours. He thought, as long as Prabhupada is chanting, then I should dance for the 3 hours also. And so that's the relationship between Vikeshwar, who was the chief dancer, and Brahmananda, who was the first dancer. So it's mentioned here. Vikesh Pandit was one of the chief dancers, and he danced continuously for the length of time. Sri Govinda Das, an Aurya devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has described the life of Vikeshwara Pandit in his book Gaura Krishnodaya. There are many disciples of Vikeshwara Pandit in Orissa, and they are known as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, although they are Auryas. So that's what Prabhupada wrote about Vikesh Pandit. So this is what the temple looked like at 26 2nd Avenue. You can see this is Brahmananda here. This is me with the red beads. That's the only kind of beads we had in those days. We had to string them ourselves. So we would tie a string to a doorknob and put the bead through the string and then tie a knot. It took a few hours to do that, to do 108 beads. And there were no bead bags then. The first bead bag maker, guess who it was? Himavati. She made and she would sell them to the brahmacharis for $3. She wouldn't give them, she would sell them. And she was the first bead bag maker. So we had bead bags through her, but that came later when her and Hansaduta joined. So this is me. I'm playing Prabhupada's bongo drum. That's how he started the kirtan until Narayan Maharaj sent the first cartels. Actually, Prabhupada asked Narayan to send 10 sets, but he only sent 1 set of cartels. So Prabhupada was leading the kirtan later by cartels. And I used to play the bongo drum. And this is Jodharani here. She's the first artist of ISKCON. Actually, the first artist was a fellow called Jagannath. And Prabhupada never called him by his name. He always called him Green. His name was Mr. We always say Mr. Green, but Prabhupada said, "Hey, Green." He would call him. Sometimes Prabhupada didn't at first call us by our spiritual names. He would call Brahmananda Bruce. You can hear it in the conversations, you know. They just redid now everything, all the tapes. And it comes on a pen drive, 120 gigabytes. And it has all the old kirtan. It even has my questions to Prabhupada in 1967 and 68. I was shocked because I used to tape Prabhupada in the walking in Golden Gate Park, and I was the first to record the conversations in March of '68. It's in the database. You can see the first recording of the conversation morning walks was myself, because I purchased the first tape recorder that ran on batteries. Because before that, there wasn't a tape recorder that ran on batteries. And it was very heavy, and the batteries were D-sized, 6 of them, and it was very heavy. I couldn't carry it. I had to make a cloth and wrap it around my body and carry it to record Prabhupada. So that's a historical fact. These are not devotees, but regular people. The temple could only hold about 20 people in those days. And Brahmananda, after Prabhupada would speak, and he would get up and give a talk about the love feast and the timings of the feast on Sunday and the morning classes. Prabhupada would give morning classes every morning at 7 o'clock. So me and Brahmananda, Haribo, you did the arti for Brahmananda? No. Oh, okay, very good. So me and Brahmananda were the first to move into the storefront because we wanted to be near Prabhupada as much as possible, even though Brahmananda had a job. But I was only 18 years old. And so I didn't have any job. So my job was to be an all-arounder around the temple. I washed the dishes, I cleaned Prabhupada's clothes, I cleaned his bathroom, I helped with the cooking. I used to watch Prabhupada how he spiced the subjis because Kirtanana couldn't do the spicing properly. And so Prabhupada would get up from his translation work. He used to type on a typewriter with these two fingers. Because Prabhupada trained me as the first treasurer accountant for ISKCON. And my office was in his room where he worked. There was no furniture, not even a bed. Prabhupada, where he sat, was on a, like this kind of pillow. And that's where he slept also. He slept where he worked. And the room was only like 10 feet by 10 feet, very small room. It was a studio apartment, not very large. The living room was the big room, but that's where what we call nowadays the deity room. That's where Prabhupada used to offer the prasadam. We had a little table with pictures, and Prabhupada would offer. He would use not one bell. You can see in the video he's using two bells. He's holding two bells and ringing and doing the prayers, you know. So we didn't know what arti was. So we used to say, oh, Swamiji's doing bells. That was the arti we called. We would make up our own words because we didn't know the word arti or offering. We said, Swamiji's doing bells now. You know, it was a big thing for us. And when Prabhupada would do the chaunts, oh, that was like fire would shoot up to the ceiling. When he would pour the oil, he used to hold it with pliers, and it's cooking and it's hot, and he would throw it in the pot, and a fire would hit and we'd go, wow, Swamiji made fire. We thought he had Shakti. He had powers to create fire. You know, we were in awe and reverence. This is totally new culture. We never, I didn't know you had to eat with your hands because there were no forks and spoons. You know, there was only our hands to eat, and we didn't know how to eat with our hands. You couldn't, actually, you're not supposed to touch your fingers to your mouth. That's the way Prabhupada ate, and he told us that. Don't touch the fingers to the mouth. But how do you get the food in without touching the fingers? So I watched Prabhupada, and he would mix the sabji. He was very artistic in mixing the sabji with the rice, and he would take it and throw it into his mouth. I tried it, and it hit the wall behind me. I couldn't, nobody could do it. We all had to touch our fingers to the mouth, you know. We weren't trained in that way. But Prabhupada was expert. We all watched him the way he mixed the sabji. It was very artistic. And the dal, he would make a hole between the rice and pour a little dal in and then mix it. Very artistic. The Indians have the most artistic way of eating because they use their fingers, you know. So anyway, to get back, so Brahmananda, he would give a speech about inviting people. And this is where so during the kirtan, Prabhupada, Brahmananda described a way how Prabhupada gave out the apple prasadam.
Now, I noticed one thing, I just noticed that the Sikh is...
This is the 100th anniversary at 26th 7th Avenue in 1996. And Brahmananda speaking how Prabhupada, he used to cut up an apple.
After the kirtan, he would not core it or would not skin it, just slice it. And then it would be passed around. And he would also take one. And he would just put it in and chew. And then somehow he was able to separate the core and the skin and so on. And then he would lean back and just spit the whole think.
He would split the skin.
And
That's
everyone
6
would
feet
say,
away.
"Wow." No one did that. So that sink is not there. They should put a sign. This is the sink, which Prabhupada used, as like a spittoon. So I was going to work. I would go every day to work to New York City, a Board of Education, and one day I saw there was a newspaper just lying there in the subway. I wasn't reading it. I'd stopped reading the newspapers. There was a New York Times, and there was a picture of Dr. Radhakrishnan. And I just snatched it up. I started reading, and it was Dr. Radhakrishnan retires. He was the president of India. And I ran back to the temple with it to show to Prabhupada, because Prabhupada had been...
Dr. Radhakrishnan is important in the early days because we didn't have a Bhagavad Gita to follow Prabhupada's lectures. Most of his lectures were on Bhagavad Gita. So there was no Bhagavad Gita for us to read the verses. So we didn't know what verse he was talking on. So Prabhupada said we could look at Dr. Radhakrishna's translation of the Bhagavad Gita because the translation was 95% correct. But he said, don't read the purports. Don't read the explanation because they're Mayavad. That's where it says that, he says that Kurukshetra means this body. That's not what Krishna says. There's a place where Kurukshetra is. So he interprets everything. So we never read what Dr. Radhakrishna said, but we did read his translation work. So that's why it was important.
Telling us all about Dr. Radhakrishnan. He had so much contact with him, and he had asked him to, join in this movement. And Dr. Radhakrishnan is the, Pakka Mayavadi, the deluded scholar, who said not to Krishna, the unborn within Krishna, and Prabhupada said so many things. And but Prabhupada had told us that he had invited Dr. Radhakrishnan to preach Krishna consciousness. And Dr. Radhakrishnan told Prabhupada, when I retire, then I will do it. And here I am riding on the subway to New York in my job, and there's the newspaper right staring me in the face, Dr. Radhakrishnan retires. So I took the article, and Prabhupada wrote him a letter inviting him to take up Krishna consciousness. And but whatever happened, nothing came of that. But then later, when Prabhupada went to India on his tour of South India, he went to see Dr. Radhakrishnan. And you know the story, how he was incapacitated and so on. He had gotten a stroke, and he couldn't even speak. He was paralyzed. And Prabhupada said, because he cannot speak because he is Mayavad. This is what Krishna is. He spoke so much nonsense, and now he cannot speak. My roommate from college, he came. I was living on 6th Street, and he came to tell me that we used to go to Ram Krishna, all these yoga places together, and he said, I just went to a very Swami, but very unusual. They were singing and dancing. We were into meditation, singing and dancing. And he said, and he has a big tape recorder. It was a tape recorder, because we refused to wear a wristwatch. We didn't want to know what time it was. So,
The 60s was like that. Anti-material.
But he said Allen Ginsberg was there. So he was our hero. So I said, I have to go. So then I came here, I walked over, and I came here and sat right back there at the door. And I remember Prabhupada coming in, the door opened, and Prabhupada came in. And as he came in, he was to get up on the platform, but instead he just stopped, and he turned, and he looked right at me. And I'll never forget that. It's like burnt into my memory that, all right, Dayananda is saying hello, okay. So, anyway, Prabhupada once asked me, he said, how did you join? So, I told Prabhupada the story. This is a very important question. How did you join? I mean, even Prabhupada was interested to know how we joined. He asked me once, this is many years later, he said, how did you join?
Maybe it was just you.
No. So I told him, my friend, yeah, I guess so. He said, I told him that my friend told me about you, and I came, but he didn't join. And Prabhupada said, oh, same with me. And then he told the story how his friend, I think Narendranath Mullik, brought him to Bhakti Siddhanta, but then he did not join. Prabhupada joined. So then Prabhupada told that story. Now I noticed one thing, I just noticed that the sink is not there.
So at one time, Brahmananda was very expert at speaking on the Bhagavad Gita as it is. I think you have his book with all his notes. He used that book to give lectures. Yeah. And he used to write in the book also. And so he was very good at lecturing on Bhagavad Gita. He would come to Prabhupada's house in the evenings, 5 o'clock, and lecture on Bhagavad Gita. He was a real student of Bhagavad Gita because when he graduated from NYU to get his BA, his paper was on Bhagavad Gita, but it was a Mayavadi Bhagavad Gita. It wasn't Prabhupada because it wasn't published. He graduated in 1965 or 66 from NYU, 4 years, his BA in English literature. So his paper for graduation was on Bhagavad Gita. So he was always interested in Bhagavad Gita. So he gave a very interesting quote and a realization about how Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse that actually, I always do stupid things. There's a verse that actually predicts the coming of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Brahmananda quotes that verse in purport. And it's always stuck with me, and I kept it. The video, it's a very short video. Go to Brahmananda's Disappearance. Here. Okay. So this is what he says about it. It's chapter 6, verse 43, I think it is. He's lecturing on. I'll read you the verse in purport after what he says.
So the verse here. Now, this verse of Bhagavad Gita is a secret to understanding the appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and also Srila Prabhupada. And It's if Krishna 5,000 years ago predicted the appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. How Prabhupada connects Bhagavad Gita with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, I mean, it's absolutely brilliant.
So this is the verse. Yeah, but I didn't get that. So this is the translation. Verse 6, chapter 6, verse 42. If unsuccessful after a long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom, certainly such a birth is rare in this world. Purport. Birth in a family of yogis or transcendentalists, those with great wisdom, is praised herein because the child born in such a family receives a spiritual impetus from the very beginning of his life. It is especially the case in the Acharya or Goswami's families. Such families are very learned and devoted by tradition and training, and thus they become spiritual masters. In India, there are many such Acharya families, but they have now degenerated due to insufficient education and training. By the grace of the Lord, there are still families that foster transcendentalists generation after generation. It is certainly very fortunate to take birth in such a family. And Prabhupada refers to himself in taking birth in such a family. Where's the... By the grace of the Lord, it is certainly very fortunate to take birth in such families. Fortunately, both our spiritual master, Om Vishnupada Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and our humble self, he's including himself in his purport of the Bhagavad Gita, which is scripture, had the opportunity to take birth in such families, which, by the way, Prabhupada says is very rare. It's very rare. By the grace of the Lord. And both of us were trained in the devotional service of the Lord from the very beginning of our lives. Later on, we met by the order of the transcendental system, the disciplic succession. You see. So that was an interesting point that Brahmananda, that I remember. Of course, he made many interesting points. Now, Brahmananda also he was initiated on Radhastami Day, 1966. I looked it up. I Googled it. Radhastami, 1966. What day of the month? It was September like 21st or so. So that's when I had joined around the 18th. I came 4 days before. The first initiation was Janamastami, which was in August. And Brahmananda was the second, along with many others, on Radhastami. And my mother came. My mother is the first mother to meet Srila Prabhupada. And she came This is my mother. Whoops. And she came to fight with Prabhupada because she lost 2 sons. So when she came, we never had a chair for people to sit, but we kept a folding chair in Prabhupada's closet. So Prabhupada told us to get the chair and have your mother sit down, because she wasn't going to sit on the floor, that's for sure. You know, that wasn't her style. And so she sat and she was nervous, and you could see in her face, she was seething with anger. She wanted to say something, but Prabhupada was very charming, smiling and talking with her. And she started to quiet down. She stopped twitching, and her face became more serene. And then Prabhupada told, we were both sitting down on the floor, me and Brahmananda, and he told both of us to bow down to your mother. Oh, then she got really back twitching again, because she never expected to see something like that. So we bowed down to our mother, and then Prabhupada casually asked her, I'm now taking care of your two sons. Can you give a donation? And she said, oh, she got all excited. Said, I just gave you my two sons. And then Prabhupada said, oh, thank you very much. He tricked her. He tricked her to agreeing to give the two sons. She came to fight with Prabhupada, but she ended up donating her two sons to Prabhupada because of Prabhupada charming her so much that it changed her completely. And she never again became against Prabhupada, because she accepted the fact that and it was a good life for us. It wasn't a bad life. We weren't bad. So she finally accepted it. Now, Brahmananda also he was the first president. Now, how that happened, ISKCON was incorporated on July 13th of 1966. Now, Brahmananda was born on July 14th. So who would know that he would later become the first president of ISKCON? So, but there was, in July and August, there was no president, there was no officers, just on paper, so we could become incorporated. There were some names, but there were no acting officers. Prabhupada was doing everything. He was doing the banking. I mean, we're getting small donations, $5, $10, $2. Prabhupada would pass around a hat. I mean, a straw bowl. And he'd put the cut up apple there. He would pass that around, and people would take a piece of apple and leave 25 cents. Very rarely did someone leave $1. And that was the donations, a few dollars, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. That's when he lectured at night. And that's when most of the guests would come. So it was very small. There were no big donations. The one devotee who gave the first big donation was Jayananda. And that was in 1967 when Prabhupada first went to San Francisco in January of 67. And he spent almost 4 months there until April of 67. And Jayananda gave him a $5,000 donation. And later on, after that, it was Brahmananda and myself. Brahmananda had an insurance payout from a car accident that happened 5 years before. And he got $3,500. And I had savings bonds that my father had saved for me, and I cashed those in. And together, mine was $1,500, his was $35. So we gave $5,000 to Prabhupada. That was used to print the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And part of the $5,000 from Jayananda was used for Prabhupada to return to India after he got his stroke. And that brings me to the next Leela of Brahmananda. Brahmananda was practically the only devotee that had the service of saving Srila Prabhupada from a terrible situation. The first situation was the stroke. Prabhupada had paralysis. That happens when you get a stroke is worse than a heart attack. A stroke means it's from the brain. And his left side was paralyzed. He couldn't move his left arm, and he was blind in the left eye. And how it happened, every morning he would give his lecture at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we were all sitting down waiting for Prabhupada to come down from his apartment. But he didn't show. So we all ran up there, and he was lying down, twitching. He was having a stroke. And we were in shock. We didn't know what to do. We were in shock. So nobody knew what to do except for Brahmananda. That's why Prabhupada chose him as a leader. He was a leader of his football team, although he was 2 years younger than any other boy. He was the leader of his wrestling team, although he was 2 years younger. He even got a scholarship for his wrestling from the largest military academy in America at Annapolis, the most prestigious military academy. He got a scholarship to go there on the basis of his wrestling abilities. He was captain of his wrestling team, captain of his football team, and he was president of his student council. So he had leadership qualities. And immediately, Brahmananda knew exactly what to do. To call somebody, to call a medical doctor, to examine Prabhupada and see, because we didn't know what to do. Prabhupada was just laying there, but he was conscious. He wasn't unconscious. But he had paralysis in the beginning. So Brahmananda explains about this incident and how he saved Prabhupada by bringing him to a hospital to have him examined by doctors and to stabilize his condition, which is what happened. Later on, I took him out of the hospital because they wanted to operate on his brain. So I saved him from a brain operation. And that's another story. That's not Brahmananda, but I'll tell you how Brahmananda saved Prabhupada by calling a medical doctor on a major holiday in America, Memorial Day weekend. Everything is closed. Everybody leaves the city. You call a doctor, forget about it. There's nobody there. They all left the city. And how Brahmananda was able to do that.
Hans Duda had just gotten a bus,
Oh,
kind of an old school bus. That was the first.
oh, here's the stroke.
And his stroke. It was Memorial Day weekend. And Memorial Day weekend in New York, everyone leaves New York City. It's like this huge exodus. And I could see Prabhupada couldn't function. I mean, it was serious. So I called my family doctor, but he was out of town. We just got the answering service. I asked everybody, anyone know any doctor? Nobody knew it. I was calling, I just took the phone book, I started making random calls. Whomever I called, everyone was out of town for the weekend. Everybody goes. At least those days, I don't know. And I know, just calling, and it's hard enough to get anyone to come to a residence anyway. And I actually could not get any doctor. And, it was either bringing Prabhupada to a hospital. I didn't want to do that. And ultimately, I just got not some kind of doctor referral service, municipal thing. And eventually I was able to get to them some doctor. And finally the doctor came. And he was this little old, I guess maybe Jewish guy. And he comes in. Of course, we didn't ask him to take his shoes off, but and there we're all standing in our kind of, we used to wear these jeans and t-shirts and barefoot. And, he walks in, there's no furniture, and just a carpet, and there's this old Indian man, you couldn't feel what's going on here. And there was Prabhupada like sick, and everyone was all, Krishna, and he just couldn't understand. So it took him a time just to understand what's going on here, then what the speaker was examining the Prabhupada. And he was a very kind of boisterous type of person, and he examines Prabhupada, and then, the studies got this, that. And then afterwards he goes outside, and so he asked him, what's wrong? He said, well, I think the old man, he prays too much. Well, oh yeah, okay. So,
See, Prabhupada didn't go out on morning walks in those days. Sometimes he would go out. I would go shopping with him to the local nearby. We had to take a bus, a municipal bus, city bus, to Kalyustan's, which was an Arab grocery store. There was no Indian grocery store in those days. And there was an Arab one, and they had a section for Indian spices, and Prabhupada was looking for certain items, like hing. Hing was very important. Not powder, but you get the actual sap of the tree or something. And you'd have to mash it and cut it up yourself. And one thing he was always enjoyed after eating was dried mango from India. Strips of dried mango stacked up and packaged. And so that's the only time Prabhupada would go out. He actually sat in his room almost all day because he was translating and typing. There was no dictaphone then, that came later. Using these two fingers, typing his Bhagavad Gita, later teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So he never really went out. He never, in 1968, I did go out with him at one time. We went to the Staten Island ferry. He wanted to take a trip around Manhattan and nice sea breezes. It was wintertime too, but he wanted to go. There's photos of me on the Staten Island ferry with Purushottam. And he wanted to go around and see things and stop in Staten Island, walked around there. We went on a walk there. So that was 68. But there was no morning walk in 66. And this is where it becomes very important. Although this doctor was insulting, Prabhupada took his instruction very seriously.
He's just praying there, he's just sitting there praying all day, and he's got to get out, he's got to do some exercise. And Prabhupada could hear him from the other room. Yep, he's got to do something, he's got to exercise, go for a walk, got to do something. Go out in the morning, take a walk, go to the park. Anyway, and then he just left, and then we gave this guy, that's all he could say. So eventually we did have to I did put Prabhupada in the hospital, then that's a whole thing. And then Prabhupada came out of the hospital, and we took him to a house in New Jersey we had rented by the seashore. Anyway, then Prabhupada did Then Prabhupada announced that now I will take the morning walk. He said that doctor, he said something very good, very valuable. We all laughed because we thought the guy was nuts. And he said, Prabhupada, no, he was giving very good instruction. I will take that up. And Prabhupada then proceeded to take the morning walk. And Prabhupada always took that morning walk. I mean, no matter what his condition, what his health was, whatever. I mean, I know stories of Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was in Switzerland, and it was snowing out. He was in a hotel, Shenzhen, took him to St. Moritz, it's a whole story. But Prabhupada couldn't go outside for his morning walk, so he took his morning walk in the corridors of the hotel. Walking, just as if he was outside, he was just walking. I mean, I know when there was an automobile accident in Mauritius, and we all had been injured, even Prabhupada. The next morning, Prabhupada rang his bell. We were all aching and paining. Prabhupada, he was injured even more. And his leg and so on. He rang his bell. We're going morning walk. And we were like hobbling, and but Prabhupada went on his morning walk. Prabhupada was also feeling, he was much older than we were. Because, you feel, the next, when there's a big tension like that, you feel the next day, all that adrenaline, it gives you a lot of pain. So, Prabhupada went on his morning walk. So, Prabhupada followed that instruction. And his stroke, it was Memorial Day weekend.
So that was the first test of Brahmananda's leadership, to take charge, because nobody knew what to do. Prabhupada's laying down there, with paralysis. What are you going to do? Nothing. Especially we're all young men. We didn't know what to do, how to help him. And that's why we had to put him in a hospital, but we had 24-hour watch. There was 24-hour watch. There was always a devotee there. And Prabhupada said the cure for heart attack and stroke is massaging. So we all took turns massaging Prabhupada's legs, arms, chest, everything. So my time, one day, he was only there for about 3 or 4 days. And my turn was at 3 in the morning to around 6 or 7 in the morning. Because everybody had jobs, so they would do it at nighttime. So I would do it late at night so they could go and sleep, because they had to go to their jobs. So one morning around 5:36, a lady comes in and said, "Time for a test." And Prabhupada's sitting there on his bed with his japa. And he said, "But no needles." And the nurse said, "No, there's no needles. It's an ordinary test." Because they were doing certain tests. Prabhupada wouldn't give his blood. That's against the Ayurvedic. You never give your blood. So they put him on a gurney with wheels, and I went with Prabhupada, and we had to go in the elevator and go to the basement where they did the tests. And Prabhupada's sitting on the gurney, cross-legged, and this lady comes behind a curtain with a huge needle, like this. And Prabhupada said they wanted to test his brain to see why so many young people, especially Jewish people, were joining, because it was a Jewish hospital, Beth Israel. it was called. And they wanted to understand why so many young people are joining this old man. What's in his brain? So Prabhupada said, no. And Prabhupada told me to take him back to his room. But I forgot where his room was. So I started wheeling the gurney down and getting in the elevator. It was only 3 stories, the hospital. And so we had to get off each floor and look for his room. And Prabhupada was sitting on the gurney, chanting his rounds, and he was looking in each room because he knew his room. I didn't know his room, but he knew. And finally we found his room. And as soon as we got to the room, he said, call your brother and take me out of this hospital. So I took him out of the hospital. I called Brahmananda. I said, bring the car. And the nurses and doctors are all yelling at us. You're going to kill the old man if you take him out. We're here to cure him. But we didn't listen to the doctors. And Prabhupada was impressed with that. Because here we're all young men, but, you listen to authority. A doctor, everybody listens to a doctor. But we didn't listen to that. We listened to him. And he saw that as surrender. We were surrendering to his authority and not the doctor's authority. Even at a young time, we're all young boys. We had only association with 6 months or less of Prabhupada, from July, August, and this is a year later in June. So we had very short. Prabhupada went away to San Francisco. So it was a very short time, but we had association. But we listened to his authority and not anybody else's. We didn't care what the doctor said. We wheeled him out and took him back to 26 Second Avenue. So Prabhupada was impressed that he saw that we were surrendered to his authority. So that was an important historical point of the movement. That Prabhupada saw he had dedicated disciples and his mission would be successful. It was a very important time. So the next time, which was a worse incident, was the car accident in Mauritius, head-on car accident. And Brahmananda saved Prabhupada from that also. And he tells the story, if I can see it. Where? In here? Oh, the Mauritius car accident.
Right, so there were some days where there was really no programs scheduled. So Prabhupada thought we'd go for a ride. We had this big limousine there, and he had nothing to do. Prabhupada wasn't going.
The Prime Minister gave Prabhupada a big limousine to use with a driver.
Mauritius is a very scenic, very beautiful place. It's kind of pristine island. So Prabhupada is riding in the back seat. I'm sitting next to him. Krishna Krishna is in the front seat. The driver is driving, and we were whizzing along. It was very pleasant. These sea breezes, the beautiful ocean, sky, and everything is very nice. These sugar canes growing. We were driving along the coastline. And beside him, Prabhupada had his cane. And Prabhupada was enjoying it very much. Had the window down and the fresh air. And he was sitting cross-legged on the seat, in the back seat. And so Prabhupada was enjoying, and then at a certain point, I didn't realize, I didn't notice it then, but later on, Prabhupada spoke. At a certain point, Prabhupada just took the cane and put it like on the floor, and was holding it like this with his two hands. I mean, just after taking the cane, we just made a turn on the corner, around the bend, and immediately, I mean, there was not a second to react. It happened so fast, head-on collision. What it was, we found out, a tourist from South Africa was driving on the wrong side of the road. And that was it. So, we just hit. I mean, it was boom, head-on collision. And everyone in shock. The driver, he's full of blood. I mean, he's just, I don't know what his condition was. Pushed to Krishna, the glass shattered. He's warm with blood. I also, my arm gashed. Prabhupada had blood on his dhoti, his knee. And my first reaction, which was a little bit maybe inappropriate, I just put my arms around Prabhupada and just held him. It was just so shocking. And Prabhupada didn't say anything. And then Krishna Krishna was out of it. I was the only one who could function. I somehow just got out of that car. The other car was a Volkswagen. It was a man and woman, and the woman, she was like unconscious, and the man, he was getting out of his car. And anyway, I realized I got to get Prabhupada out of here. I didn't know where we were, and I didn't know where our house was. I didn't know anything. And anyway, then after a while, a car comes by. And now Mauritius, of course, is it's an Indian place, and there are very few Western or white people. So anyway, this other car, the car that we had, they were white people. The car that also came, there were white people there. So anyway, I tried to stop the car. The car just went right by. They didn't want to. They saw the accident. Didn't want. Anyway, then another car came by. And this time, I stood in the middle of the road. The car stopped. So the car stopped, and I went up to the people in the car, and I said, "Please, we need help. My grandfather." I don't know what to say. I said, "My grandfather is injured, an old man. Please, you have to take us to the nearest hospital." So they said, "Okay," but they also saw the other car with the woman.
You have those
They saw Prabhupada. They saw
candies?
And they see this woman.
Give me one.
She's unconscious. She's full of blood. Prabhupada just had a little bit of blood, but she was really bad. Volkswagen, head-on collision. So and then the other man wanted for his wife. He wanted attention for his wife. So we were competing, and so then we said, "Well, maybe we should take her first, because they didn't have much room." And I said, "No, you take us." The other man said, "No, we want to go." And I just slapped the car. I said, "You're taking us, and you're taking us right now, and let's go." There's no. So they said, okay. And so I took Prabhupada out of the car, and we went and Prabhupada was absolutely silent, never spoke a word. I put him in the car, get in the car, and then these people start driving. And anyway, we're getting in the car. I mean, the only reason they were taking it is because I forced them. And we get in the car, and they say, "Well, we don't know where the hospital is, and this and that." And anyway, we're going over here to our hotel, and you can go to the hotel. And I said, no, we want to go to a hospital right now. And so Prabhupada didn't say anything, so I knew whatever I was doing, Prabhupada was agreeing to because he didn't say anything. So, but then I could see these people weren't helping us, and they didn't even want to take us. They didn't want to find the hospital. They just wanted to go to. So I realized being with these people, this is not good. I just told them, all right, stop the car. They're not going to help us. Stop the car. And they started the car, and I took Prabhu. We got out of the car. And then they left, and there we are, standing in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know where to go again. I mean, lost, you know. And then another car comes along, and I stopped that car. But this car had 3 Indian guys in it. And they saw Prabhupada, they were, you know, offering respects and Swamiji, and I said, take us to the nearest hospital. Get in the car, we go to the nearest hospital. Then Prabhupada said, no, take us home. No hospital. So,
No
I didn't even
hospital.
know where our home was.
Accident?
Eventually, they could understand where it was and so on. And so anyway, they were very happy to take us immediately home. Could have gone all the way to the other side of the island. I mean, it was quite a drive. So we go home, and the car pulls in. Harikesh Maharaj was there. He didn't come with us. He stayed. He was doing the transcription. He stayed back. I mean, he didn't know what because we left in a limousine and we came back in this junky old with 3 Indian boys, a junky old car. And then Prabhupada gets out of the car and there's blood on his door. I'm like, Harikesh, he's shocked. And Prabhupada's not speaking anything. Just goes into the house, sits down in his place. And so we had to dress. There was a wound. We had to dress the wound, clean it, and then. So then Prabhupada was saying that now he wants to go back to Bombay. Prabhupada never wanted to leave Bombay anyway, even for these any other tour, because Prabhupada was very much concerned with the Bombay project, getting the land, you know, the fighting all the government, the municipality, the local politicians, the residents, the seller. I mean, it was just a constant battle, required constant supervision. Prabhupada had to do that.
So just see, again, Brahmananda exhibited his leadership abilities to take charge of such a situation out in the middle of nowhere. Who would do such a thing? How would anybody else act? But Brahmananda had those leadership qualities and took care and protected Prabhupada. There's another incident that Brahmananda told me, and it happened at the Philadelphia Rath Yatra in 1975. Prabhupada was giving the morning lecture on that day, and this yogi comes in with all his female assistants and sits down, and he starts interrupting Prabhupada's speech, constantly interrupting and trying to show off to his students. And Brahmananda and Prabhupada had a code, I noticed, a few times, where Prabhupada would look at Brahmananda and go like this. And that meant take care of this situation properly. And now Brahmananda was a wrestler. He was the captain of his team. And he had a grip like iron. And all he did was walk up to this yogi, put his hand on the shoulder of the yogi, pressed it so hard, and whispered in his ear, "It's time for you to go." And man went, okay. And the man left with his entourage. So they had a certain relationship in this regard. Brahmananda was always there to protect Prabhupada from anything. And he was the longest serving secretary at different intervals, different years. But totally, he was the longest serving secretary, personal secretary to Srila Prabhupada. Even when he was present in Africa, he would leave Africa and be with Prabhupada. Now, Mahadevi wanted me to show another video about how Prabhupada wrote in the Bhagavatam about this Krishna Balaram temple, how it started, how it came to be. And Brahmananda links it up with the Bible by using the word creation and desire. And it's only a short, it happened during the 40th anniversary of Krishna Balaram, which was in 2015. And this was in April. And just 2 months later is when Brahmananda left his body. This was his last lecture, actually, that he gave in this temple. It's only 6 minutes long, but it's very nice.
But I want a specific answer. What Prabhupada said, actually he wrote in his purport, Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says,
Who created?
first of all, creation, what does creation come from?
Lord Balaram.
Huh?
Lord Balaram.
No, what prompts creation? All right, I'll tell you the answer. Desire. First you have to have desire, then you create the thing. So,
All
in
the old
Srimad
devotees were
Bhagavatam,
there.
10th canto, chapter 13. Chapter 13 is stealing the boys and calves by Brahma. What's the significance of this chapter? Stealing the boys and calves by Brahma. What's the importance? This was the last chapter that Prabhupada translated of Srimad Bhagavatam. Right here in Vrindavan, in his house, on his bed. You've all seen the photos. Pradumya holding the dictaphone. So, this is the final chapter. And this verse, this purport, is one of the final verses that Prabhupada composed. So, we should think, the final words are most important. So in this purport, Prabhupada reveals, he talks about himself, which is very rare. Prabhupada in his purports hardly ever wrote about himself. He writes about himself, and he writes about the Krishna Balaram Mandir. So the verse number 50, is about the desire of the pure devotees. Do pure devotees have desires? And if they do, what are those desires? And where do those desires come from? Well, the verse explains that Desire in the pure devotee is created by the sidelong glances of Vishnu or Krishna. So Prabhupada is writing about the word Svarkarthanam refers to great desires. As mentioned in this verse, the glance of Lord Vishnu creates the desires of the devotees. A pure devotee, however, has no desires. Therefore, Sanatana Goswami comments that because the desires of devotees whose attention is fixed on Krishna have already been fulfilled, the Lord's sidelong glances create variegated desires in relation to Krishna and devotional service. In the material world, desire is a product of Rajaguna and Tamaguna. But desire in the spiritual world gives rise to a variety of everlasting transcendental service. Thus, the word Svarkarthanam refers to eagerness to serve Krishna. In Vrindavan, there is a place where there was no temple, but a devotee desired, quote, "Let there be a temple.
This
Let there be seva."
this is a biblical statement,
Devotional
which
service.
Brahmananda will say.
Unquote.
Let there be a
Therefore,
temple.
what was once an empty corner has now become a place of pilgrimage. Such are the desires of a devotee. So, we may think that we constructed this temple and the deities and everything, but actually it was simply due to Prabhupada's desire. He wanted a temple in Vrindavan. And it was created. Simply even this phrase, "Let there be a temple." You know where that comes from? It's a biblical phrase in Genesis. Because Prabhupada, he read the Bible at Scottish churches. Let there be light. And there was light. Let there be creation. There was creation. Let there be a temple. And there was a temple. So it was, Prabhupada is, and he refers to himself as a devotee. He doesn't, in the third person, he doesn't even refer to himself in the first person. So humble. So because one devotee desired, even it was a vacant place, now it has become a place of pilgrimage. And we can see that in Prabhupada's entire history, his career, that everything happened because of Prabhupada's desire. We couldn't see that. He didn't reveal it to us. But otherwise, how did these happen? Otherwise, you have to call them miracles. I can tell you of Nick Mill.
So that was, Brahmananda had unique perspectives on Krishna consciousness and studied deeply Prabhupada, the personality and how he thought. And that's why Prabhupada appointed him to get the books Bhagavad Gita published. Prabhupada was very concerned when he first came to America because in India, from 1960 to 65, he was able to publish 4 books, the Bhagavatam and Easy Journey to Other Planets. But while in America, he hadn't published any book. He had already completed the 2nd canto. It was ready for publishing. But there was no publisher who would take it. And he was working on the Bhagavad Gita. So he put Brahmananda in charge of getting it published. Because of Brahmananda's background in English literature, he graduated in his BA from NYU. So Brahmananda got copies of some of the chapters and sent it to various publishers all over the United States. But nobody was interested. Now, during this time, it was December 1966, and before that, when Prabhupada was chanting in the park, we didn't chant in the wintertime, it was cold. One record producer came to see Prabhupada chanting at Tompkins Square Park, Mr. Coleman. He was a record producer, and he did not ordinary records. He did Malcolm X. He did records that were controversial, but interest by people of various nationalities and interests. So he wanted to record. He called the temple and talked to Brahmananda, and he wanted to record Prabhupada's chanting. So Brahmananda talked to Prabhupada about this, but Prabhupada wasn't so much interested in making just recordings. He said, because people will listen to one record, then they'll go to another record. He wasn't interested. But the producer said to Prabhupada, but you can speak. Oh, then Prabhupada was interested, because he did speak on the record about the Hare Krishna mantra. So we arranged in December to go to the recording studio, but we had no instruments at that time. There was no cartels, no mridanga. All we had, I used to sell these finger bells. They fit on your fingers and you play them. In flamenco, they use them. Flamenco dancing, you've heard of flamenco dance? You're Spanish, right? You're... Oh, Priya. She knows you know from flamenco. So I used to sell them for $7. I bought them for $3 and give the money to Prabhupada. I was the first to make money for Prabhupada. That's why he called me Gargamani. I was only 18. I didn't have any money, but I used to make money for Prabhupada, selling back to Godheads at night, putting a little gift table in the back of the temple, selling incense, and giving the money to Prabhupada for his book fund and for the temple expenses. So we had no instruments. And then the night before the recording was supposed to happen in a recording studio, a African man came, black African man, and he came to the temple to join in the kirtan, and he had a wooden mridanga. They're very long, and you use these blocks to change the sound of the drum. They're very heavy. And we asked if Prabhupada could play it for the kirtan. And Prabhupada, we didn't know that he could play mridanga. And he played it like a professional. And the kirtan sounded so good, hearing that sweet sound of the mridanga. You know, so we asked him, man, can we borrow it for the recording for a few days? He said, sure. So it's like Krishna sent it. And one of the favorite sayings of the devotees at that time was, Krishna provides. Whatever Prabhupada needed for his mission, it came. And we were flabbergasted by that. whatever Prabhupada needed to carry on his mission, it was sent somehow or another through people or whatever. And we would always say, Krishna provides. And Krishna provided everything for Prabhupada's mission. He provided the people, the artists, the managers, everything, money. Everything was thrown at Prabhupada to carry on his mission by Krishna. And so that was a big realization for us. You know, we saw that there is Krishna because we saw it in practicality, how things were provided for Prabhupada's mission. Although he was penniless, he had nothing, but everything was provided. So we went to the recording, we recorded the record, and I really wanted, I sold the record to the stores, bookstores and record stores. But the only way to get the record to be heard is by playing it on the radio. And there was a station, a really progressive station, that came on only at night until the morning time. And they had their antenna on top of the Empire State Building, very high antenna. So people in South America and in Europe could hear that station. And they came on at 12 o'clock at night when all the other stations went off the air. So it was easy to catch the station because of the strong signal. You know, when you turn the dial, there's so many stations. But with this station, you turned the dial, there was no sound except that station. So I said, I'm going to go to that station and bring the record. And this is a progressive station. They had Allen Ginsberg on. They had the Rolling Stones on. They had Bob Dylan on. So you had to go there at 12 o'clock at night. So I went there and brought the record. As soon as I opened the door, a huge blast of marijuana came in my face, smoke. I go, oh boy, now I'm in for it now. And I told them I have this new song you've never heard about. And they started playing it. And it was the Hare Krishna Consciousness record. You can see the album cover in Prabhupada's house. Mr. Coleman sent that record to Brahmananda to be in the museum downstairs. It's there, right? Yeah. So I started playing that record, and they played it the whole night. And because they were high, they really got into the chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And the marijuana made me sleepy. I was tired because I never stayed up late because I lived in the storefront and we had to be up by 6 o'clock in the morning because Prabhupada would speak at 7. And we used to take our bath at the sink. We'd use sink baths. There was no shower. There was a big sink that Brahmananda spoke about where Prabhupada would spit the apple peels. So that's where we took our bath in the morning before the class. If Prabhupada said, if you clean the 9 holes of the body, that's as good as taking bath. So that's what we did. And so anyway, the next morning, I came back to the temple because I fell asleep there. Then about 10 days later, a courier came with a box of letters of people with money in it. They all wanted the record. We found out from Mr. Coleman that George Harrison in 1967 ordered 300 copies of even before the devotees went there. They went in 68. He heard the song, the record from London. People from South America were sending money. It was only $3. And there are at least 100 different letters from all over the world. And we had special record boxes that we could slide the record in and ship them. So one letter came, and it had the letterhead of Macmillan. One letter. And Brahmananda opened it up, but it was from an accountant, but with the Macmillan letterhead. It wasn't from the publisher's office or anything. It was a simple accountant who wanted the record. But for some reason, Brahmananda went to Prabhupada and showed him the letter. And Prabhupada said, don't send the record, you go there and bring the record. But he's just an accountant, Brahmananda said. He said, no, you will see. You go there. Don't send the record. You go there personally and deliver the record. As if something was going to happen that we didn't know about. So Brahmananda went there and delivered the record. And he's sitting in a little cubicle office in the Macmillan big office building. And while he's sitting there, Brahmananda at that time, he had a shaved head. The only two people shaved up in those days, Kirtananda and Brahmananda. Nobody else had a shaved head in those days, in the early days. And he had a little Sika. He worked for the New York City Public School System, and they asked of him, why you have a bald head, a shaved head? And so Brahmananda, he said, well, I have a skin disease and I had to shave. He didn't tell him he was Hare Krishna, you know. So they said, oh, okay, it's okay, you know. Because nobody in those days had shaved heads, you know. So Brahmananda is sitting in the office, and this man, well-dressed suit man, comes walking in, and he spots this man wearing suspenders with a bald head sitting in an accountant's a little cubicle. And he said, what's going on here? You know, he wanted to know. So he walks into the cubicle, and he sees Brahmananda there, and Brahmananda stands up, and he says, I'm bringing this record. And he says, oh, yes. And he introduces himself. I think his name was Adam Wade. I think that was his name. And I'm in charge of the Oriental catalog for Macmillan. He's in charge of publishing the Oriental books for Macmillan. And the Bhagavad Gita comes under the Oriental page. So Brahmananda said, oh, you're in charge of publishing for the Oriental? I have a Bhagavad Gita ready. And Mr. Wade went, you what? I have a Bhagavad Gita. He said, I'm looking for one. I need one for our catalog. I don't have one. Bring it in. I'm ready to publish it. And that's how the Bhagavad Gita got published by the record. The record published the Bhagavad Gita. And what Prabhupada predicted came true. Don't send it, you go there. And this is what happened. As if Prabhupada knew that somebody would be there to publish his book. So these are not miracles, these are leelas. You know, miracles, Prabhupada said, is meant for the ignorant who don't understand the Lord's mercy in the Lord's leela. And that's how the Bhagavad Gita got published, through the record. So this is where Prabhupada himself mentions that Brahmananda was the first. He did it in a lecture in New York. This is in New York.
You can practically see those who are old and bad. So I used to get it in this New York, that sport farm. Simply by chance. So I did not buy American boys and girls to come after. They did only as it was chant. The talking son of this Brahmananda Swami, he first came to dance with my chant. He and Achyutananda. That was the first dancing of our Krishna conscious movement. Yeah. And I had no Vedangas.
That was what is that? The little drum.
Bongo
I was
drum.
chanting Hare Krishna for from 2 to 5, 3 hours. And so many boys and girls were coming and joining. And there was first photograph. 3 York Times, they appreciated. And people also appreciated. So this chant, the beginning was all chant. There was nothing more. At that time there was no program of prasad distribution. That later on it came. So we should always be confident that this chanting is not a vibration of this material world. This is not vibration of material. Prabhupada Thakur says, Golokera premo dhana hari nama sampi. It is imported from the spiritual world.
So we were learning in these days, in the early days, all these new authorities. Narottam Das Thakur. Who's Narottam Das Thakur? We never studied him in school. But Prabhupada was introducing us to new authorities in our life. Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. Prabhupada was constantly quoting from the disciplic succession. Our movement is based on disciplic succession. And that disciplic succession doesn't end with Srila Prabhupada. It continues. And it has been continuing for 5,000 years, more than that, millions of years with Brahma. And it will go on. And Prabhupada made that apparent in his preaching. He wanted all his disciples to preach, to become spiritual masters, and continue the disciplic succession. Not that it stops with Prabhupada, as these stupid Ritviks think. They say, oh no, the disciplic succession stops with Prabhupada. It doesn't go on. No, you're wrong. You're an offender. You're a pasandi. It continues, and it is continuing all over the world. There's more people chanting now, more people buying books, and more people eating prasadam than when Prabhupada was here. So that's the proof that the disciplic succession is going on and must go on. So now after Prabhupada came out of the hospital, Brahmananda rented a house in New Jersey on the seashore so Prabhupada could recuperate, because he still was having reactions and twitchings in his body from the stroke. The paralysis had left, but one thing I noticed, after his stroke, he stopped writing letters by hand. He would just put small things like PS or note back, NB means note to back. But before he used to write handwritten letters. But he stopped that. And I think that had something to do with his stroke. So this is how Prabhupada looked. And this is the most amazing thing. When you look at Prabhupada, you see, after a stroke, there's reactions in your body. A lot of people have paralysis. They can't speak, like Dr. Radhakrishna. He couldn't speak anymore after his stroke. And look at our Jayapataka. He can't speak. So, and there's many different paralysis after a stroke. Usually 50% of the people die from a stroke, but another 40% of the people have different difficulties in movement, in walking, their eyes, their speech. But just see Prabhupada after his stroke, and you'll be shocked. This is just 10 days after he got out of the hospital. 1967, before he went back to India. Look at that smile. Is that a man who had a stroke? It like vanished externally.
ignorance, illusion, cheating, laziness, interpretation, madness.
It's like Krishna intervened and gave new life.
One who is in the quality of darkness, moves into the
Prabhupada was very animated while he spoke, not showing any paralysis at all.
So, these are called darkness. So, if actually one is in Krishna consciousness, these qualities will be not visible in his person. This is a state of
But still, Prabhupada had internal problems. That's why he had to go for Ayurvedic treatment back to India. And even though it's June, it's still quite chilly on the seafront. He's wearing a heavy coat.
He can be present in various potencies. He can be present by his name only.
In those days, there was no video camera. There was only these Super 8, small color cameras, so there's no sound, live sound. Oh, we had these little Jagannaths. That's an interesting story.
The response cannot be. That's like, okay?
Sometime in 1967, I think it was February, while Prabhupada was in San Francisco, the devotees would go to this import shop called Cost Plus Imports. And the devotees noticed these little figures. They didn't know who Jagannath was, but for some reason, Malati brought one back to show to Prabhupada. As soon as Prabhupada saw it, he offered obeisances. He says, Lord Jagannath has come to us. And that's how Lord Jagannath came to San Francisco, that Prabhupada called New Jagannath Puri, which is also by the sea. San Francisco is right on the seafront. And so we bought all the those little Jagannaths. We bought the whole stock and they sent them all over the centers that were. There's only 3 or 4 centers, Montreal, New Mexico, there was one, Albuquerque, and then in Boston. So anyway, they sent, and we put little screws in the head and wore them as, as a pendant. And I had one also. And I asked Prabhupada, when we go into the bathroom, do we take Jagannath off? And Prabhupada looked at me, he said, Jagannath is not around your neck, he's in your heart. But of course I took it off, as we do with the beads, So, but Prabhupada said that to me, Jagannath is not around your neck, he's in your heart. So, anyway, that's Kirtananda, he's wearing one. I can never see where they're... So after this, Prabhupada went to back to San Francisco because they rented a house by the sea near San Francisco. Because the devotees thought we weren't taking care of Prabhupada. There was a competition between the devotees in San Francisco and New York who would take care of Prabhupada more properly. So Prabhupada thought, I'll do one more chance and go to San Francisco and see if it increased my health there. But while he was there, he didn't like that place because it was, to get there, you had to go through these mountains. And Prabhupada got dizzy in the car because it was winding roads. And he got dizzy. Also, he couldn't go to the temple. It was too far away. And they had the first Rath Yatra was in 1967. On Shamsundar's pickup truck. He turned it into a cart. And he had already carved the first batch of Jagannath deities, you know. So Prabhupada couldn't attend the first Rath Yatra. There's a film of it, which I'm going to put on my Facebook on Rath Yatra Day. The first Rath Yatra was in the summer of '67. So Prabhupada didn't attend that, although he was in near San Francisco. So Prabhupada didn't get better. He actually internally got worse. And that's when he thought he has to go back to India to get treatment. And he left on June 24th for New Delhi, along with Kirtananda. So this is a video showing Brahmananda in the early days. This is Prabhupada offering, doing bells. This is where he offered the prashadam. Those are plastic flower. We couldn't afford real flowers. What happened to the sound? No, go all the way back. Why did it go off?
Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. I practice my Krishna consciousness by chanting when I work and on my way to work. And this is what we ask all good people to try chanting. Try it when you wake up in the morning. Try it on your way to work on the subway. I know I chant every day on the way to work in the subway, and other people are kicking and shoving. I'm chanting. I enjoy my subway ride.
This is Satsarupa. Satsarupa is here. Satsarupa. This is Hari Griva.
And now we're going to go uptown to St. Mark's Place to do our kirtan and spread joy and peace to the people of New York. We invite all our friends to join us. Hare Krishna.
Demon people, when they heard the sound of Krishna, they would drop flower pots from above the buildings, but nobody got hit. Just by hearing the name of Krishna, they became demonic.
Bringing them from Brahmananda to the Samadhi.
Yeah, I lost that one, but this shows Brahmananda interviewing, 3-hour interview with Padmanabha Goswami of Radharaman. He told us all the secrets of the deity. It's on my YouTube channel. You can see it. It's 3 hours long. But this is a short excerpt of how Brahmananda went to Africa. He came back from Pakistan, and Prabhupada made him the first president of Juhu. This is 1971, late 1971. But he didn't fulfill his responsibility there in a very good way because we didn't know how to deal with Indian contractors. They were overcharging us. And Brahmananda built the pandal at the Juhu for the deities that were installed there. Prabhupada wanted to immediately install the deity before we even got the land. Because once you put a deity on the land, it can't be moved. And that's why Prabhupada wanted the deity. So we had to have a little pandal. And we weren't used to dealing with the contractors. We didn't know they were cheating us. And the man wanted to charge like 1,00,000 rupees or something. In those days, that was a lot of money, 8 rupees to $1, not 85 rupees. It was 8 rupees to $1. So when Prabhupada heard this, he said, oh, no, 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 no. And Prabhupada dealt it came from 1,00,000 rupees down to 10,000 rupees with Prabhupada there. So Prabhupada said, you're not ready to be the president. So Brahmananda had really nothing to do. So he was in Vrindavan, and this is just how he went to Africa.
And I came in 1971, Prabhupada sent me here. There was only one devotee here. Here, Dakshai Vishnu. Did you know him? He passed away recently. Yeah. He made a temple here in Vrindavan.
Oh.
And,
Where is it?
but one thing, when I came, I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada, glorifying Vrindavan. I thought it was the most wonderful place. And I wrote Prabhupada a letter saying how nice Vrindavan is. So Prabhupada's reply to me was not,
Thank you.
he said that it's very nice that you are appreciating Vrindavan, but better, maybe he saw that I wanted maybe to stay in Vrindavan. He said, but better go to Africa and make a black Vrindavan. Oh. And I came in 1971, Prabhupada sent me here. There was only one devotee here. Pure Daksha.
So that's how he got to Africa. In 71 he went, all by himself at first. And while he was there, later on, he met Muhammad Ali. This is a famous picture of Brahmananda and Muhammad Ali, who is very interested in Krishna consciousness in Africa. He was very religious, actually. And they had a good time. They gave him prasadam. And that's how Brahmananda met him. But Brahmananda, at first, he was only preaching to the Hindus there. He didn't know how to approach the Africans with kirtan. He was only going to the Indians. But Prabhupada didn't like that. He said the future of Indians is to make the black Africans devotees. Otherwise, Indians have no future. And that happened with Idi Amin, who ejected 60,000 Indians out of his country, Uganda. And that was going to happen all over Africa. That's why Prabhupada said the future of Indians in Africa depends on Krishna consciousness to make the black Africans devotees. And that's when Prabhupada himself started the preaching to the black Africans. By organizing, Prabhupada organized this himself with the Indians to rent the hall at the Nairobi University. And to do this, we needed a poster made to advertise. And this is in Prabhupada's own handwriting, how to make the poster that he wrote. What Prabhupada would do is when he would get a letter, an envelope, he didn't throw away the envelope. He would cut the ends and use it as scrap paper for writing. And this is an envelope that he used to show them how they should make the poster in his own handwriting. Prabhupada called it World Hare Krishna Movement, a peaceful revolution conducted by the International Society for Krishna Conscious, founder Acharya A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Manifesto presented at meeting at the Taifa Hall, University of Nairobi, in June 10th. What's today's date? Oh, almost the anniversary. 1971, by Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami. This is Prabhupada's handwriting. Press report published by the Nation of something. He wanted all the press reports that came out when Prabhupada arrived at Nairobi to be mentioned there. He drew the lines, you print all the press reports. And this function was a grand success. The Africans were jumping and dancing. You know, part of African culture is dancing. You see it all the time at political rallies. The leaders are always dancing. And Krishna consciousness is a natural religion for the Africans because it's based on dancing, eating, chanting, and worshiping a God that's black. What better way to attract black Africans? There's no other way. When they see Jesus, he looks white. He's never looking black, he's looking white. When they see Krishna, he's black. So it's a perfect religion for the Africans. So Brahmananda started the safari. This is from Back to Godhead. The Indians bought him a van, and they called it the Hare Krishna Safari, and they went all over Kenya, Tanzania or something. Here they're preaching to the Maasai. You know, the guys that are tall and jump while dancing. And Bhagavad is here, Brahmananda and Chaivana. Then Brahmananda was the first to go to Nigeria. Here he's preaching at a law college. And he's the only white person in all the picture. There he is, right here. And he was chanting there. The only person to preach to the Nigerians. He was the first person to preach to Nigerians. So he mainly kept his preaching for the black Africans. And we made a lot of black African devotees. You can see them here on Sankirtan in Kenya. Dancing down the street. So Brahmananda was a unique personality. He published Bhagavad Gita, then he published the Krishna book. He got that published. He even went to Japan and forced them to have it ready for Rath Yatra. Then he was in charge of the press in Boston, where he printed Back to Godhead, Ishupanishad, Nectar of Devotion, and Bhagavatam, second canto by chapters. So he was very unique and had very unique talents for publishing books. So it's getting late now. So if there's any questions, you can ask questions if you have any questions. But I gave a brief biography and history of Brahmananda's service to Prabhupada and his mission. So I hope you learned a lot about Brahmananda. Haribol, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Brahmananda Prabhu. His picture is there. This was taken in Mayapur. Actually, I'm standing next to Brahmananda, but I just wanted a picture made by the grace of Mahadevi. She got this photo done for me and framed. It's a very nice photo with Brahmananda and Prabhupada. I have almost every photo. Brahmananda's in almost every photo because he was the longest serving secretary. So wherever Prabhupada went on morning walks, especially, you'd see Brahmananda is always there. He was always with Prabhupada. You know? I think he got the most association of any devotee because he was the personal secretary in different years, not all at one time. I think the longest serving personal secretary was Tamal Krishna. For 8 months he was secretary up until the disappearance day. He was with Prabhupada. Brahmananda was in Vrindavan, but he had to leave 5 days before to go back to Africa, because whenever he left Africa, he would go downhill. He had to be there. So he left 5 days before Prabhupada's disappearance. So I just want to let everybody know the things that you hear on social media that Prabhupada was poisoned is bogus. Never happened. There's no such thing, and the people who are promoting this are actually demons in the dress of devotees. So don't listen to them because you will be corrupted by this. Brahmananda was there, it never happened. The thing is, they misunderstand the whole thing. Prabhupada was taking a medicine called Makata Dvaja, which is poison because it has 6 metals in it. It has mercury, which is poison, copper, gold, silver, and it's used a bunch of with other things, with arsenic. It has so many things in it, and what it does, it's supposed to stimulate the heart. It either stimulates the heart so you stay alive, or it can kill you. So fifth line devotees, all the way down the line, heard, oh, Prabhupada's taking poison. He's being poisoned. No. What happened is the devotee who got this medicine in Delhi got it from a bogus Ayurvedic doctor who said he had the preparation in the fridge. Now, this medicine has to be made fresh. You can't keep it in the fridge. But he didn't know. So he brought the medicine for Prabhupada, spent like $200, at that time a lot of money. And Prabhupada was taking that medicine, and Prabhupada said it's creating a poisonous effect. So devotees who weren't there, but it came down the line, you know how stories get created when it's repeated 100 times. Oh, Prabhupada was poisoned. No, it created a poisonous effect. And even his Ayurvedic doctor who came at that time, when he was taking it, looked at the vial and he said, no, this is poison. This is not, it doesn't mean it was poison, that Prabhupada was poisoned. It had a poisonous effect. So it's a whole misunderstanding by neophyte devotees. So don't listen to neophytes. Listen to authorized devotees who were present there, like Bhakti Charu, Bhavananda, Jayapataka. Brahmananda was there. No such thing happened. It's all a nonsense conspiracy. People who create conspiracies, it's noted they took too many drugs when they were karmis, and they are always paranoid. So they think everything is a conspiracy. And most of these devotees were drug users before they joined Krishna conscious, but it affected their psychological thinking, so they're a little crazy. So don't listen to such nonsense. My brother was there and he knows what happened. So any other questions?
Where's that photo of Brahmananda blue on the head? Is that Mauritius?
Yeah, I think so.
He was so healthy there. Then
Well, he wasn't in India. I was healthy in India because I had my own cook, a Marwari cook, Shantilal.
what's your name
Oh, I don't know.
Is she still alive?
Well, I don't think so. No. Prabhupada said he should teach all the devotees how to cook. Prabhupada liked his cooking a lot.
Did he come to Bombay? Because that's when you went to Bombay?
Yeah, well, I got him in Calcutta. He used to work in the Birla family. And I asked Sitaram Daga to get me a cook. Because all the devotees were getting sick. Because there was no gas in those days. We used wood coal. And devotees didn't know how to use wood coal. They would burn everything, burn the rice, burn the dal, burn the sabji. Everything was burned because they didn't know how to use a wood coal stove. So he got me this Marwari cook. And he was Pukka Brahmin. He wouldn't even touch a dirty pot. I had to hire someone else to clean the pots because he wouldn't touch them. But he was expert at cooking. And he kept the devotees healthy. And I brought him on my library party. And he cooked for all of us. And no one ever got sick. So. So any questions you have about Brahmananda? Okay, so it's 12:30. Thank you very much. Haribol. All glories to the devotees. Haribol.